Hey guys, happy Valentine's Week. So this is your public service announcement that Valentine's Day is this week, and you need not forget. Okay. I have another quick thing I want to talk to you about before we get started this week. I've been anticipating this episode coming out. It was one of my favorite that we were going to be doing this season. And so, but there's a story to it, and I need to explain it to you so that you understand what's going on with the podcast. So, this today is #ButGod with the Freemans, a wonderful family in Oklahoma that I had the privilege at the very last minute of getting in touch with during my time in Oklahoma and getting to sit down and meet them and spend time with them. I got to Oklahoma, we set up, we did the podcast. It was so good. They have so much good insight, and the story is so powerful. And towards the end, I realized that my microphone had been bumped, I guess, in the packing, or my buttons had been pressed in the packing and the unpacking, the craziness of the travel. And I had muted myself for the whole podcast. And so at the end, Jeremy Freeman was so great. He was like, I thought that was so good. How did you feel? And I was like, I feel like the microphone was off, and we were all just having a moment, right? Oh my gosh, I cannot believe this. Very quickly, being as gracious as he is, what can we do? How can we fix it? Worked on a plan, talked about it. I said, you know what? We're not going to worry about it. You're traveling today. I've got to get on the road to Tulsa. Let me get settled somewhere and see how bad this really is. And so I spent 2 hours driving to Tulsa from there, and had a lot of time to be aggravated with myself, frustrated with the situation. I was thinking, how do you go all the way to Oklahoma and mess up a podcast where you can't just fix it, really quick? You can't go back the next day. But during that time, I felt like, as I shared with Jeremy, I felt like I had my own #ButGod moment, that the realization that, what I had to say with my mic being muted and nobody being able to hear that what I had to say was just really not important. Because these stories that people share, just like the Freemans and the Taylors and all the other stories you've heard in season 1 and now in season 2, they're stories about God. They're God stories. And we just get, me especially, we just get to have a very small part in bringing them to you and sharing what God's doing in people's lives and how faithful he is. I felt like God was really illuminating the Freemans and their story, and that it was, accidents happen, microphone buttons get pushed, but it wasn't important. What I have to say in this is not important. What I have to say any week is really not important to what God is saying and how he's speaking through these families and these couples and these people, individuals. That's what's important. And so please have mercy. I'm asking for apology, for forgiveness. I'm apologizing that the sound quality is going to be a little messed up, because what I was able to do due to our microphones was raise the sound, which is going to sound muffled when I talk, but bring their sound down to try to even it out. And so what you're going to hear today is their story. You'll hear me and you'll hear my prompts and my thoughts, but clearly you're going to hear their story. And I just feel like that's what's most important on this episode, is that you hear this family story of what God did and what God is continually doing through what happened in their lives and what has happened over the span of their lives. So again, I apologize for the sound. I am not an audio engineer. I don't claim to be one. I did the best I could with what I had, but honestly, I felt like in the big scheme of things, it didn't really matter, because as long as you can hear the Freemans and hear God's message of hope and love and healing, that you've heard all you need to hear today. So again, thank you for being here for this episode. Just bear with the sound. You might have to make some adjustments as it comes up and down and on and off. But more than anything, just hear what the Freemans have to say. You'll hear and see God all through their story. And I'm excited for you to hear that today. So I hope you have a great Monday. Thanks for being so gracious. And thanks to the Freemans for letting me screw up their podcast, but in a way that actually brings more glory to God and just shines the story of what God's done in their life. over their family and the people they're touching. So, guys, I hope you enjoy. This is #ButGod. Welcome to Southern Soul Chats, where this season we will be diving into the stories of individuals who have navigated the deeper waters of faith. I'm your host, Dr. Miranda Ferguson, and together we'll explore the journeys of people who've taken that courageous step forward in their faith. Get ready to be inspired as we uncover the incredible stories of unwavering belief and the remarkable impact it's had. If you're excited to join us on this faith-filled exploration, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Let's step forward. Hey guys, I'm so excited to be with you today, and I'm mainly excited because I'm on a field trip. I have left my office in Texas, and I'm in the big state of Oklahoma, and so this is super exciting to have this opportunity. This week's episode is #ButGod, a special episode where I'm honored to be in Oklahoma to share a deeply moving and profound story that has also been turned into an amazing book. A book written by a family who have braved the depths of tragedy, fear, and then emerged into the radiant light of divine and continual transformation. In this episode, we're going to embark on an extraordinary journey through the grief, doubt, tension, and hope. A journey encapsulated by the powerful #ButGod. In this heart-rending yet inspiring saga, Jeremy will be our guide, along with Caleb, sharing the highs and the lows of a story that has stretched the boundaries of human experience. And before I hand over the mic to these guys, let me set the stage. There's a story that began in the shadows of tragedy and fear, a narrative that could have easily been consumed by despair. However, what makes this tale extraordinary is the turning point, the moment marked by the divine intervention, where the old was taken away and a new life emerged. This is the essence of #ButGod. So guys, you're going to have to buckle up, get your tissues out, because this one's going to be an emotional roller coaster as we navigate through the darkness, embrace the moments, and witness the glorious rebirth that stems from the power of faith. This is not just a story, it's an invitation to witness the miracles that have unfolded when God takes the center stage of our lives. So without further ado, I present to you Caleb and Jeremy's story, #ButGod. Thank you so much, guys, for having me today.
Well, thanks for coming all the way to Oklahoma.
I'm excited.
Thank you for having us.
That's right. It's our honor.
We're having each other.
There you go. There you go.
So I am, like I said, I am super excited to be here. This book is amazing, guys. Just so you know, this book is #ButGod by Jeremy Freeman, and it's he's going to definitely be hitting on the high points, but I got to tell y'all, you've got to read this full story. And even the back has a 7-day plan that you can read after it, which just really takes you deeper into the story and understanding what these guys have been through. So we're just going to get into it. So, Jeremy, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do, and we'll get them comfortable with you.
Gotcha.
Wait.
Yes.
First, before you do that, I gotta give a little plug for the book. Everyone should read the book because I happen to know the author. He's a pretty cool guy.
Well, thank you, son.
That's amazing.
You're welcome.
I didn't even pay him to say that, Miranda. That's
I'm sure you're going to have to take him to Starbucks and McDonald's later.
There it is. All right. Well, I'm Jeremy, and of course that's Caleb that you heard, father and son, and I've been pastoring First Baptist Church in Newcastle for 14 years, going on 15 years. I've been in full-time ministry for about 25 years. My wife and I will celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary next year. We have 7 children. Our oldest is 23. She was recently married in April. So I have my first son-in-law, and then we have a bunch of other kids. We have one of ours that's in heaven. His name's Trey. We write about him in the book. He's been with the Lord 10 years. He passed away when he was 7 years old. So our family's been through a lot of difficulties, but we've just really tried to embrace the life God's given us and try to use our story, like we say, for God's glory. I can tell you more about my upbringing if you'd like, but I mean, that's kind of where we're at in life right now.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you, it's really what you just said is played out. Like, you do a beautiful job painting that in this book.
Thank you.
Moving through it and explaining. You think when you open the book, you're just going to hear about Caleb.
Yeah.
And it's like, surprise!
There's a lot more. That's right.
Surprise, there's more. But the way it all tangles together.
Yeah.
Is absolutely beautiful. So I will ask you. So were you raised in a faith-filled home?
Yeah.
As a child, that was just the normal for you guys.
Well, it's interesting because just real quickly, I think this is important. My dad was raised in a horrible upbringing. 9 stepfathers. His mom was married 9 different times. Raging alcoholic. My dad was raised in the most horrific life you could imagine as a child. First time he ever got invited to church, he was 16 years old. Never been in church a day in his life. Walks in, hears the gospel, gives his life to the Lord. And the music minister hears my dad's story, takes him in and raises my dad his last 2 years of high school. That's an amazing story in and of itself. But I share that because I ended up, so now I'm grown up in a strong Christian home. My dad was called to ministry. He travels the globe sharing the gospel. Amazing story. I went to Christian school in San Antonio, Texas, where I was born and raised. Church all the time. But like a lot of church kids, I ran from the Lord. And I did not truly surrender my life until I was 16. I was a junior in high school. I was going to go to Texas A&M University. That was kind of that was my goal, all this thing. And then God called me to ministry, and I heard about this random school in the middle of nowhere called Oklahoma Baptist University in Shawnee, Oklahoma. Next thing I know, I'm going to school in Shawnee, Oklahoma. And that's kind of how I got to Oklahoma.
So do you miss Texas at all?
Listen, my parents are so mad that they're like, you're a Texan. You are a Texan. And I'm like, well, I've been in Oklahoma longer, so I'm kind of Texoma, you know. But we go to Texas quite a bit, and we love it. We're still big San Antonio Spurs fans. I mean, we don't hold it against us Houston people, but I mean, we absolutely love Texas, no doubt about it.
Well, we're from Alabama, so we're not considered true Texans.
Transplants, you're transplants.
We love Texas too, but again, it's so great to be here. And I found myself texting when people say, "Hey, where are you?" I'm like, "Okay."
Okay.
How are you? Where are you? I mean, okay. I'm okay to be in.
I'm okay, and I'm in okay. Yeah.
I'm like, okay, gosh, Oklahoma. Here you go.
There you go.
So, like I told you guys, not only is he all these great things, he's now an author, and his book is easy to get, and we're going to get into that later.
Yeah.
But here's just some kind of themes and titles and purpose, like he said. I mean, it talks about it on the back. It breaks it down. This book and this story gives you an understanding of the beauty of God that can come through suffering, glimpses of how a family grew closer together through tension and doubt, hope for whatever you're facing. This today is not just centered around this story. It's just the story of trusting God no matter what you're in.
That's right.
And it is a very powerful example of how God works through the prayers of his people, which I know that this being a small town, I am sure that they hovered around you guys.
They did.
That, again, in your book. But when you're here, it's a little different. Like, I was driving here and I was wondering, is this the rodeo Walmart?
Yep.
Is this the Walmart he goes to?
I know.
And then I get here into Newcastle and I look around and I go, oh, I get it.
There it is.
I get it.
Yeah, this community rallied around us. Of course, with our son Trey, when he passed away, they rallied around us big time then. And then 4 years later, Caleb was a great athlete. He was known in the school. Of course, our church is kind of the staple in this community. So, yeah, man, they rallied around us big time here.
So let's just get into your story and do what you guys do best. So I know you have a way that you guys tell this story. So
yeah.
I'm just going to give it to you because that's what we're here for.
Let it go.
And let you guys create that vivid picture for our listeners of this moment and how it went, and then we'll pick up there.
Well, Caleb,
can you tag me in
Oh, I'm tagging you in, man. Hang on a second there. Yeah, so Caleb, we'll set this up like we normally do. Caleb, he's 22 years old, and Caleb is the second child in the lineup. He's number 2.
But would I be quick to tell y'all that don't be too concerned by hearing I'm number 2 in the lineup, because actually 2 is a better number than 1. So therefore, I'm pretty much number 1 in the family.
You're number 1. So this is funny because Caleb, before the wreck, was our most shy, quiet, reserved child.
I really find that hard to believe.
It's ridiculous, man. People today that don't know him, that didn't know him before the wreck, they're like, no way. But Caleb was super introverted. He 100% never loved to be singled out, never loved to be embarrassed. Well, that ship has sailed. He loves to, wherever there are people, Caleb is happiest. We're in a lot of airports, right? So we walk into the airport, first thing Caleb does is see if our flight's been delayed. He prays for a delay because he's like, that gives him more time to work the room. Isn't that right?
I actually do pray for a delay because it's like open season for me. I'm like a heat-seeking missile.
That's true.
And like, if you make eye contact with me, it's no longer my fault. It's your fault. Because I'm going to find a way to come talk to you, whether you want me to or not.
That's right. So Caleb, he uses humor and awkwardness with people to kind of break down the barrier. And we've discovered people have a wall up, but Caleb has a way of breaking that wall down. And then he's learned that people will give him about 60 seconds, and he'll share a story really, really quickly. And that usually opens up the door to some kind of an amazing conversation where sharing the gospel or praying with someone or just ministering to them, or they open up to us and begin to tell us their story. So even though Caleb's kind of funny and awkward, God uses that to help us share the story.
Yeah, like what he was saying, like I'm seeing, it doesn't matter who they are. Everyone has some kind of wall, like put up in front of them, or you can't share the gospel, or you can't share a story with them because of that wall like blocking you. But I'm seeing how God will even use something like humor. And like once you do that humor, that wall comes right down, and you have a way to share your story or share about Jesus that you would have never gotten without it.
That's right. And so Caleb, it'll be 6 years in December. He was a sophomore in high school and 16 years old, and he was on the varsity basketball team, number 1 cross-country runner in Newcastle High School, just a great athlete. And he was on his way to a University of Oklahoma basketball game. I had done a funeral that morning. The funeral director gave me 2 tickets to the game, and I called Caleb, and I said, man, do you want these tickets? I couldn't go because my wife was having a Christmas party at our house, and I was supposed to be watching the younger kids. And Caleb said, yeah, I want the tickets. I said, well, get your brother, who was 14. I said, you guys meet me at this restaurant in the parking lot. I'll give you the tickets, and you guys can go to the game. So I pull in this parking lot. Caleb's there in his truck with his brother. It had started raining. And, Caleb had driven in the rain before. The OU, University of Oklahoma, is not far from where we were. So I thought he'll be fine. And made sure they were buckled. He had his phone put away. Clayton had the directions up on his phone. His brother gave him the tickets, and off they went. And literally, he pulls out, goes 10 minutes one way. I go 10 minutes the other way. I walked into my house, and my phone rang, and it said Caleb Freeman. So, I had just seen him. It felt like 2 seconds ago, but about 10 minutes. And I answered the phone. I said, hello, and there was a man on the other line. And I was like, hello? And he said, sir, do you have 2 sons? No, hello, my name is, none of that stuff. And I said, yes. And he said, well, they've been in an accident. How quickly can you get here? There was something about his voice, though, that was making me feel like, okay, something's happened. And he wouldn't give me any updates. He wouldn't let me talk to Caleb. I heard my 14-year-old, his voice in the background. So I was like, okay, Clayton's okay. I kept saying, let me talk to Caleb. And he kept diverting the conversation. We'd hang up, he'd call me back. Hang up, he'd call me back. Finally, he says, sir, I'm not a medical professional, but I can tell you your son is still breathing. And I was like, still breathing?
Yeah, who told Yeah, like who just tells you that?
Who tells you that? I'm like, what in the world? I'm like, what do you mean? I'm thinking, okay, so this is more than a fender bender, what's happening?
With a flat tire on the side.
Exactly. So I'm panicking, my wife and I and you interrupt me whenever you want, but my wife and I, so we get in the car, we're driving to the accident scene. It's raining harder now. And man, we're going through all this traffic, and we get to the accident scene, and we're kind of whipping around the road, and I'm doing everything I can to get there because traffic is have to drive in the grass just to get to where the accident is. And man, I pull up, and there it is, man, a semi-truck, 75,000 pounds, which I did not know that, had T-boned Caleb directly on his side. And there were 2 ambulances, and they ushered us over to the ambulance where Clayton was. Clayton had a concussion. He was in and out, and he was also in shock. He didn't remember the accident, but he did keep asking, where's Caleb? How's Caleb? Caleb was in the other ambulance, and we did not know this at the time, but they had resuscitated him, put a breathing tube in, and they were really just trying to, do all they could to support him. We found out later they had called in the fatality team because their anticipation was he was not going to make it to the hospital. And it was that serious. And what happened was he suffered a severe traumatic brain injury. Now I can go further into this thing, you want me to, but if you want to kind of stop in between.
What I'm convinced, like God, He protected me from zero broken bones.
That's
Like that's kind of crazy to me because the 75,000 pounds hit me like directly on my side.
That's right.
And I know I'm not like Superman or anything, so there's no way. Yeah, right. Like kryptonite for me would be like pretty much anything around me.
Yeah.
But like the fact that I had zero broken bones, I know that was nothing about myself, but there had to be God protecting me, and like it just makes a lot of sense. And I allowed the brain injury because that will always be with me. Like no matter what I do or say, I can't get rid of that. Like I always have that. So I see it as like God has given me a forever reminder that will always be there to remind me of the faithfulness that God showed me in my wreck.
That's right.
So in your book, I read your book, and then I told you I got to page 9 and said, I don't think I can read this book. But I persevered.
Yes.
And I'm so thankful I did. But what's crazy is I went and pulled a video. I just found a random video of you guys doing your thing. I wanted to see how you interacted. I wanted to just hear your story and watch it together. And you put a detail that I don't remember reading here about them telling you later that his head was literally like on the grill of his truck. And I had to pause the video.
Oh, man.
I was like, wait, I didn't see that anywhere.
Yeah. Well, sometimes as we were writing that, we got to meet the EMS worker that worked the accident scene about a year later. He says he's been doing it 25 years. He's never seen someone survive that kind of head trauma. And when he got there, Caleb's head was resting on the grill of the semi-truck. I mean, he took a direct shot. Caleb was wearing a white Nike hat, and the force of that semi hit Caleb so hard that hat flew off and landed on top of the semi-truck. And somebody actually took a picture of that and sent it to us, years later. I didn't even know somebody captured that, but it shows you the force. And so Caleb suffered what's called a diffuse axonal grade 3 brain injury. I knew nothing about diffuse axonal. When I heard grade 3, I thought, oh, good, at least it's not a grade 10, until they told me grade 3 is the worst.
Yeah, like, that's the best.
Yeah, they're like, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is the worst. So it's like a shaken baby syndrome. His brain was shaking inside of his head. And he was given, of course, less than 10% chances. And he was in a coma, right, Caleb, for 8 weeks, 2 long months.
Yeah, well, basically, I was just taking like one of the best naps of my life.
Yeah, this dude, he says he was in coma heaven. And I'm like, dude, it was not coma heaven for us.
Wasn't coma. Your book clearly paints a portrait of
No.
not coma heaven.
No, not at all.
But for them, maybe not. But for me, I was just asleep. It was fine.
He's just chilling.
Right.
Just like God was just doing his thing.
Like most people, they wish they could like sleep for like 2 months, like usually, but I actually did it.
So you guys are there at the scene. They've got the 2 kids separated, keeping you away from him, probably to have all hands on him without the emotion of
Right.
parents and people. And then they usher you guys out.
That's
make
right.
Everybody stable and move you
They
out.
told us, they said, man, get to the hospital as quickly as you can. So my wife and I were driving to the hospital, and Emily, like, she is the steady of our whole family, And I write about that in the book. She includes her journal entries, which I think are huge, awesome. She's like, I've never seen her that emotional driving to the ER. She was just begging God to spare Caleb's life. Having lost a child 4 years before, we were just, at that point, you're thinking there's no way we'll survive the loss of another child. So we get to the ER, and 2 things happened right away that really showed us God was stepping in. One was there was an African-American woman there in the ER with her own family. She had a bunch of little kids, and she could tell my wife and I were in distress, and we're over talking to the lady at the cashier or the registrar lady, and I felt these 2 hands drop on our shoulders, and this woman just began to pray for us. And like God just sent her to us because we were in an utter panic. And for the first time in that whole 2-hour, window, God just brought a peace to our life. And I'd love to meet this woman. We never got to meet her again, but God really used her. And then about 15 minutes after that, another woman came running in. I remember she was wearing a white outfit and she had blood all over her. She came up to Emily and I and she said, "Are you Caleb's parents?" And we said, "Yes." And she said, "My name's Jolinda. She goes, I saw the accident. She goes, I pulled off, and she goes, I'm certified CPR trained instructor. She goes, I ran across the highway. She goes, nobody was tending to Caleb. So I climbed in the truck, and at this point, the truck is still pinned up to his side. So she had to go through the passenger side, climb over the console, and they had taken Clayton out and put him in the back seat, like the people that were, but nobody was tending to Caleb. Come to find out, they didn't want to touch him because they thought he was dead. So Jolinda was like third person on the scene, even before the EMS got there. She said, I want you to know something. She goes, I cleared his airway. I stopped the bleeding. He was bleeding everywhere. And she doesn't even know us. And she said, I'm a believer in the Lord Jesus Christ. I prayed over your son from head to toe, and God has told me your son is going to live. And I remember thinking that was so relieving, but it was also a little bit nerve-wracking because I thought, man, I'm sure she's trying to be well-intended, but how does she know? And, you know, and she didn't know we had lost a son or any of that stuff. But God really used her to kind of breathe life into us, that maybe he was doing something different with Caleb than with Trey. Because we prayed for Trey just hard we did for Caleb, and God chose to heal Trey in heaven. And so we didn't know, you know, but man, God was showing us right away he's doing something a little bit different.
Yeah, like hearing about how people were like sent to be there for my parents, like during their time of distress, it just shows me, like, if God's doing something bigger, he'll always send the little subtle reminders.
That's right.
That he has everything under control.
That's right. And God just did that every step of the way.
He did. And one thing I got right off the bat in your book was just how open you are to your emotions.
Yep.
You refer to your wife as constantly as being the rock, and through her journals, you can really see when God spoke to her, which we'll get there in a minute, but she really anchored into that.
Yep.
But the fact that you're a pastor, I think there's a perception that you should be the one who just automatically said it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
When the lady spoke that to you, well, that's it. It's a done deal.
Done deal.
It's good. We're just gonna sit here and we'll tell everybody we got a word. But you're so raw. I mean, you say in your book, which you mentioned a minute ago, I was still struggling to believe that God healed here on earth.
That's right.
And when I read that, my heart dropped. It dropped because I thought, you know, here's a pastor, and he just had loss in his life, and it's not been a huge amount of time, but just so raw of saying, you know what, I see this a lot. I'm a pastor. I go into family brains.
That's right.
I do funeral services. You had just left a funeral
That morning. That morning.
And the raw emotion is just so good, because it would be easy to have left some of that out of the story.
Yep.
And people would have just expected that because you were a pastor that you just knew it.
Well, I think that's when, you know, we'll probably get to this eventually, but I think one of the things that people need is they need to know that they can be real in their grief, and that God is big enough to handle all of that. It's not as though God expects us to be like hunky-dory, just, oh man, hey, listen, you know, he knows it's a struggle. In fact, in John 11:35, Jesus actually wept when Lazarus had died. And Jesus could have walked into town and said, what's wrong with all you people? Why are you crying? I'm getting ready to raise him from the dead. Dry your eyes, people, let's go. But before Jesus did this incredible healing in Lazarus' life, he identified with the loss of the people. He wept with them because he knows their pain. We're human beings. We grieve. We're supposed to grieve, you know, but we grieve with hope. You know, we don't grieve without hope. We grieve with hope. So, you know, with Trey's death and all the things that happened in 2013, I just had not seen a lot of miracles. And I kind of got jaded a little bit. Like, maybe God just doesn't heal on earth anymore. And so one of the big things God has done in my life through Caleb's wreck is he's reminded me that he doesn't always heal on earth, but sometimes he does. And so it's changed the way I pray for people. It's changed the way I handle adversity, because I know that God can do all things. Impossible does not exist with God, right?
Like as believers, I felt like we've really dropped the ball on one thing. We've really messed up one area. Like, we're always so good about sharing our strengths with people, but all strengths can do is impress other people and make them like look at you as higher. But we need to get better at sharing our weaknesses, because we connect with people and people relate more to your weaknesses. So if you want to open the door to share about Jesus, I think the key is sharing your weaknesses.
It is, and I think the society we live in now, it only encourages the happy, because social media I don't know about you guys, but I haven't really happened on a lot of pages where it says like my life's horrible, everything stinks today.
Right.
But God, it's the beautiful vacation and the expectation that everybody's living this hunky dory life. And you're right, people they're not really honest.
Yeah.
And I think that they are not sure if they can be honest.
That's right. I think that's the thing. We've not created a safe space for people to express their fear. And again, we don't want people living there. God doesn't want us to live in our fear. He doesn't want us to live in our anxiety. He meets us there and carries us out of that. And then we have this story where we can say, man, God, he meets us in our pain. I mean, God has met me in my darkest hour. I know there are harder things, I'm sure, than losing a child, but no doubt losing a child's got to be one of the hardest. And when Trey passed away, man, that was a defining moment for me. And God met me in that moment of loss and has really lifted me the last 10 years in a way that I've come to know him more personally, more deeply than I could have ever known, had that not happened.
Like when this wreck happened, I was at my darkest hour probably because I had like nothing. Like I was pretty hopeless. And like looking to this culture, like it would have wanted to keep me there. Keep me helpless, say I had no purpose, had no reason to keep on living. But I'm thankful to be able to share today that Jesus Christ, he wants to meet you at that low place, but he doesn't want to keep you there. He wants to pick you up and carry you higher to places you never thought you could go.
It's good.
Throughout your book, I just continually see through all the different stories that are entangled with this one, how God constantly pushes your family closer to him by making you run to him.
That's right.
It's throughout the book. From the loss of the child to Caleb to your wife's brothers, he's constantly pushing you guys.
That's right.
To say, hey, there's nothing else that's going to help you here.
That's right.
Like you said, I have never lost a child, and so clearly I can't relate with that. But I'm a mother of children, and I think that was one of the things that really got me in the book. That as I'm reading this, I'm thinking to myself, A, my time with my kids is so precious.
That's right.
B, I am not promised that all of them will be here tomorrow, and C, like, oh my, could I have even done this as well as you guys? It might not have seemed well when you're in it, but the insight and what you're doing, like I don't know that I would have not just crumbled and been like, I'm done.
Yeah. Well, people often say, man, how have you endured and how have you done all this? And you're like, man, you want people to understand that it's not us. It's the Lord has really carried us and lifted us and ministered to us. And he's brought people along beside us. We've gotten to see both the local church at its finest and the Big C church at its finest. We've had people minister to us that don't even really know us, but they're followers of Jesus and they've stepped in to help us. It's really been amazing how God does provide and meet your needs in the midst of what you're going through. And it's like, I mean, you cannot look in the scripture and find anybody that God used that was not significantly tested. I mean, even Jesus himself, right? If anybody should have been exempt from suffering, it should have been him, but he suffered the most. So if he's not exempt, none of us are exempt.
Yeah, like nobody gets a hall pass.
Nobody gets a hall pass, man. We're all in this thing together. So I appreciate you saying that, but it's the Lord that is really, he's strengthened our, we wouldn't be anywhere without him. Nowhere.
Like, I heard the best thing from my grandpa, Ken Freeman, actually. A faith that can't be tested, can't be trusted.
Right.
So, like, our faith my faith went under the ultimate test whenever I got in this wreck. But it's come out stronger. So what that gives me tremendous faith is that my faith has undergone the test, and now it's proven that it can be trusted.
That's right.
That's really good.
That'll preach, Caleb. That'll
Yeah,
preach.
yeah, just let Caleb have it.
He'll preach. Yeah.
So in the book, you mentions your wife that she just felt in the midst of the hours that you weren't sure what was really happening. I don't know if it was even before you knew what he had.
Yep.
God had given her a peace. So we'll pick up there and
Yep.
we'll get through your story and tell everybody the rest of it. And I promise I won't butt in. I'll try.
No, that's good. So yeah, we're in the ER and we're upstairs. The surgeon comes in and he says, "Man, your son suffered a traumatic brain injury. And actually, right before that, they weren't giving us a lot of info on Caleb. So I pulled this. This is where "but God" came from. I pulled this nurse to the side, and I said, "Ma'am, can you give me an update on my son?" And she said, "Sir, has nobody talked to you yet?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, I don't know how to tell you this, but she said, your son, he needs a miracle." That's the moment where I really knew this was life or death. And I fell to the ground, got my phone out. I sent a message to my family, to our church staff, and I said, here's what they're saying. And I typed in 2 words, "but God." I had, obviously, "but God's" all over the Bible, but what I was saying in that moment was, man, if God doesn't step in, Caleb's gone. And then next thing we know, we're upstairs. The surgeon tells us a brain injury. He's going to have to put a tube in Caleb's head to drain the fluid off the brain. And I'll never forget this young doctor. He looked at me about as serious as he could, and it was like a grave look. And he said, "We're going to do everything we can to support your son." He said, "But I got to be honest. We don't expect him to live through the night." He said, "These next 48 hours are critical." And he said, "If he survives, it's going to be a miracle." He was really trying to help us prepare for the fact that Caleb's brain was swelling so fast. They didn't think.
He knew that it was outside of his capacity.
That's right.
To be able to stop.
That's right.
What was happening.
They were going to try to get the big deal was swelling and the fluid on the brain. They said, "We're going to try, but we can't. There's certain things we can't control." And sure enough, man, Caleb lived through the first night, and then he lived through the second night. And the doctor said, "Well, he survived the first 48 hours. That's good." And he said, "But he's laying right here. He's on a feeding tube, breathing tube. He had the trach, all the stuff." And he looked right at me. He said, "I'm not trying to be negative, but," he said, "this may be all Caleb does, like for the rest of his life right here, like just vegetative." He said he may never wake up. He may, he never know you, never walk, and all these things. And you're going, man, it's like hitting you like a ton of bricks. And we're just beginning to pray. I mean, and God just in the book, we write about all these people that God sent into our life that just, because there's story upon story upon story. And it began to be clear that God was doing something different with Caleb. Even my wife, she went from panic all of a sudden to this ridiculous peace. And she felt like God told her, "Start writing this stuff down, Emily, because Caleb's going to have a story and God's going to, I'm going to use him for something greater." So Emily starts journaling all this stuff. It was almost like, at one point I was like, is this the way that she's coping, or did God really say this to her? But she was like, "Jeremy, no, God has told me." So she's just writing and journaling. Her journal entries are so powerful because you can see the grief and the pain, but man, you see this lining of God's hope in there like crazy. And so, yeah, that's where she began to document.
I love this. Her journals. I'm not going to tell y'all too much about this book, so I want you to go get it and read it. But her journals in the chapters, pretty much. There's one in the beginning of chapter 1. They end it. And on this particular night, which you guys need to understand, this is December, right before Christmas.
Right.
Supposed to be, to most people, the most joyful season of the year.
That's right.
Lights, the family, the happiness, the little twinkle in the eye of kids. But you guys are not feeling that at all. And she puts, written from the ICU, this is what I highlighted, but it says, "Knowing we have no power on our own, we hold the power of life. He holds the power of life and death. He is our only hope. And so we cry out day and night without ceasing."
That's right.
And, you can say that.
Yep.
But when you're literally crying out day and night without ceasing, it takes on a whole new meaning.
That's right.
I could envision her as a mom and you guys just knowing that that's it. You just had a doctor say to you, "This is it."
That's right.
Like, there are no promises. There's really not even a lot of hope for me.
Yep.
By the book standard, by the book that taught me how to do this,
Yep.
it says it's a no-go, guys.
It's a no-go. That's right.
It's a no-go. But like your story says, #but God.
Yep.
God said, "Really?
He said, "I'll show you."
Let me, hold on a second."
Well, that's what "but God" means. What is "but God"? We like to say, what is "but God"?
Yeah, because like after my wreck, a lot of different people, like doctors and nurses, they were putting all these odds against me. Like, it looked pretty hopeless for a while. Like they said, Caleb would never walk again. Caleb would never talk again. Caleb would never even eat again. Every single time, as God performed those impossible odds, and I began to do them again, it showed me people are going to say a lot of stuff in my own life, but at the end of the day, but God will always have the final say.
That's what we say, but God has the final say. And that's been a theme for us because, man, the night before Caleb's wreck, where were we? We were gathered with our family. in Shawnee, Oklahoma. My wife's brother had just died 1 month before that. He married three sons. He died just suddenly. And so we were in at his widow's house having Christmas. We were all grieving and, of course, missing him. And little did we know that the very next day, Caleb was going to be in this accident. So here we are as a family already grieving together on December the 16th. And the next morning, Caleb had basketball practice. And I did the funeral. And little did I know that evening we'd be undergoing another major catastrophe in our life.
I love in the book, and it kind of goes back to your son that you lost. But you say that you say that to your wife that you I just do it with Trey with whatever.
Yeah.
And Emily's like, I call that.
I call that.
Like, wait a minute.
She called me on it.
Like, what do you mean here? Are you serious? And you're like, well, not really.
Yep.
It sounds really good. But what I love about that is that you talk about the 3 isms.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, we all battle with them.
That's right.
Narcissism, the love of self. Hedonism, the love of pleasure. And materialism, the love of all things. And as I thought about these and the book continued on, I was like, man, it doesn't matter if it's a car wreck, a loss of a child. These 3 things are always constant. And it's a check in the spirit when you do lose the things you love.
Right.
And you go on to talk about how we all want our lives to be great. We want to have all the material things. We want to have. We want to love a little bit of ourselves. We want to think we're special.
True.
God created me, and I'm special, most special person here. But at the end of the day, we're really just created to bring glory back to God.
Yeah.
That's right.
And this situation, just like all your others in your family, it's just so obvious that God took it, and through the pain and through the hurt and the hard, he twisted it back to him and gave you guys such an amazing story as a family.
Right.
Because you can reach so many different people.
Oh, man.
All these isms.
Yep.
You can reach all these isms. And you say, it's hard to know that his glory isn't always put on display with sunshine and rainbows. This is my favorite part. Sometimes it's revealed with a storm that wrecks you.
That's right.
And I know today there are people out there who are living storms that are wrecking them. And I think that's why your story is so important, is that even in a wreck, a literal wreck. Literal wreck.
That's right.
Caleb is doing so many amazing things, and it totally shifted your life.
That's right.
I mean, it didn't just affect Caleb.
Oh, man, it affected all of us.
It's affected you. It's affected this community. You're traveling around 3 states in a week.
That's right.
And the impact, Caleb, it's amazing.
That blows my mind. Like, I still think I'm a nobody, but God's using me for bigger things. It shows me, like, you can't, like, view yourself as so lowly and think you're not able to do anything. Because if you're a believer, that means you have the Holy Spirit living inside you. So, like, he can do more powerful things than you can ever imagine if you depend on him.
Yep, that's right.
Absolutely true. So, after some time, you guys had to leave the hospital.
Yep.
They wouldn't let you stay forever.
Nope. We wanted to.
But you guys chose not to just head home.
That's right.
That you had some signs of maybe there were some other options. So Caleb had been in there. You weren't sure what that was going to look like, but then they tell you, hey, it's time to go to the next phase, and here's your option.
Yep.
So what did that look like?
Yeah, so he'd been and he opened his eyes about a week after the accident, and we thought, oh man, he's waking up. Well, it shows you we know very little about brain injury. His eyes were open, but there was no like intelligible response, and so anyway, he I guess they said you guys need to start thinking about long-term care. And man, so we start researching. They're giving us options, and there were several. There was one in Houston called Tier Memorial, and then there was one in Atlanta, and there was one in Denver, Colorado. And so the more we began to research, people were kind of directing us to Craig Hospital in Denver. So we had to make a decision. Caleb, first off, had to be accepted, which he had to have a certain level of consciousness to even be admitted to Craig, which to this day, I don't know how he got admitted. I mean, I do know how.
Right.
God did it. But he was not conscious enough to to be considered like
For
to
their
qualify.
service.
Yeah, but he got admitted, and so we moved our whole family to Denver, Colorado, and Caleb had to have a special flight there, and it was a difficult journey because he was neurostorming at this time, so it was hard to get him settled, and he's not responsive, but he's reacting. His brain is doing all kinds of craziness, and he gets to Craig Hospital. And we write about it in the book, but we don't always share this part of the story because it's pretty amazing. We should share this more, Caleb. But his
I'm in full agreement with that.
you're in full agreement. His first day in the hospital, his doctor walks in. Caleb, keep in mind, he's not really responded. People with the doctors in Oklahoma thought he had, but it was hard to discern if that was like a real response or just some kind of like just involuntary reaction. Well, his doctor walks in and goes, "Caleb, can you move your eyes to the right?" Caleb moved his eyes. "Can you move your eyes to the left?" He moved his eyes. The doctor, in great surprise, looked at the nurse and goes, "Did you see that?" She goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Let me do it again." Caleb, he did the same thing. Caleb moved his eyes to the right and the left twice. Caleb did not respond again for another 6 weeks after that moment. But it was enough for that doctor to see it because our insurance company, about a week later, was trying to kick us out of Craig Hospital because they were like, "He's not responding. You need to put him in some nursing home for young people." But our doctor, because he had seen that response, was fighting for Caleb. And he would be on the insurance company for hours trying to. And so finally, Caleb, the doctor, I guess, stalled long enough to where one day Caleb was sitting in his wheelchair and his occupational therapist said, "Caleb, can you nod your head yes?" And out of nowhere, Caleb nodded his head.
I mean, I would give you a demonstration.
Yes, but they
But
can't.
y'all can't say that, so it'd be pointless.
Yeah, Caleb, so go ahead, nod your head. Ready, nod your head. He's nodding his head right now.
Confirm he is not.
She's confirming. So he nodded his head, and you would have thought we won the lottery. This guy started waking up, and like a few days later, he wrote his name. A few weeks later, he was eating steak. They were like shocked in
You
Colorado.
found out he was hearing you
He was hearing.
that whole time.
Yeah, I mean, and so people often ask Caleb, "Could you hear anything when you were in the coma?" He doesn't remember anything.
I would say no, but obviously I was retaining some information.
Yeah.
Because while I was in the coma, I got in December 19th, and it didn't come out until
It was February, mid-February.
mid-February. So that means the year changed. And the only way I would know that is if I could hear people tell me that I was in the coma. And whenever I came out, I knew it was 2018.
Well, his occupational therapist walked in, or speech therapist, and she had a list of questions for him, and they were multiple choice. So, Caleb, what city are you in? Houston, Denver, Los Angeles, or somewhere else? And Caleb had to pick. So it wasn't like it was the only option. And she had 25 questions like that. He knew every answer. He knew the year had changed. He knew he had been hit by a semi-truck. He knew he had a brain injury. So he had to have been retaining that while he was in the coma.
I didn't get every question right. I got 24 out of 25. But I'm convinced my favorite number before the wreck was 24. I'm kind of a stubborn kid, so maybe I missed one on purpose.
Must have been it.
Yeah, I think it kind of makes me think in the moment you said you were asleep.
Yeah,
So right, like to everybody else's eyes, no, you weren't asleep.
that's right.
But how could you know that, right? Like how God had him in a holding pattern,
That's right.
but at the same time his brain was a brain that has a level 3, which is not the good number.
Not the good number.
But yet his brain is able to retain this information and tracking the whole time, and you can't see that.
No.
You can't know that. You and your wife are struggling to see what does this look like.
Yep.
They're not giving us great answers, but the whole time
He's
there
processing. Yeah.
I mean that's unbelievable.
Well, we always tell people, so be careful if your loved one's in a coma. Be careful what you say. They might come out remembering, "Hey, you talked about me," But
It's amazing that in the same token you say that. I mean, it's really serious.
It
for
is.
what you say, but think about what Caleb was hearing.
Yep.
He was hearing. I've noticed where you put him here. You are playing worship music. You came in his room. You were catching worship music. You had people praying over him, praying with y'all in the room. He was surrounded by godliness.
That's right.
Surrounded. So while his brain is picking back up on the processing and all the things that are firing off, it's being fed with positivity, with goodness, with all things God.
Yeah.
Which I think is amazing because you were going to need it.
Yeah, I think that's like very amazing too, because the fact that my parents were like doing all the worship music and like believing that God was gonna bring me out while I was still in a coma and still unresponsive. I think that's what showed people that was what true faith is like.
That's right.
Like believing for an outcome before it comes.
Yep.
So how long was he in Colorado?
We were there from January the 15th to May the 15th, so 5 months. His wreck was on December 19th, 2017, and we moved to Denver mid-January, and we were there to mid-May. He woke up middle of February, and so we had been there a month, but he had been a month in Oklahoma, so it was 8 weeks total before he woke up.
And did he do all of his therapy stuff there? Like they were teaching. I know he had to learn to walk again.
Yes.
Walking. That all happened in that facility.
All happened in Craig. You know, we like to say a lot of Caleb's big early progress happened at Craig. So this guy could not take a fork and put it to his mouth. He couldn't speak when he woke up. He had to use a spelling board. So he would point to letters to spell. It took forever to get what he was trying to say. I mean, he could nod his head. He could do all those things, but he had to relearn how to speak. He had to relearn how to do everything. I mean, he could not do a thing. And Craig, man, Craig was a godsend. And, you know, obviously we're big believers and supporters in that facility. And there's amazing stories. We met incredible believers there that were nurses and part of Caleb's care team.
You gave an amazing Valentine's Day
That's it.
with the notes and
John 3:16 from room 316.
his room just happened to be room 316.
That's right. Oh yeah. And Emily, my wife, Emily's a little evangelist too. She's like, man, we're gonna, you know, while we're here, you know, that was one of Emily's big deals. She was like, we're gonna go wherever God has us, He has us for a reason. So every place we saw, you know, we saw it as a mission field. You know, we believe that where's your mission field? Wherever your feet are planted. Wherever your feet are is where your mission field is. And so Craig was not just a place for Caleb to recover. It was also a place for us to, of course, share Christ.
So then it came time you had to leave Craig.
Yep.
I'm sure you didn't want to.
Oh, man. I'll never forget that came to us. And I could tell they didn't want to tell us this because they knew how bad we wanted to go home. And they said, we think Caleb would benefit more if he went to another facility. And I was like, where? And they were like, Omaha, Nebraska. I'm like, what? What is in Omaha, Nebraska?
No, I kind of love it because
College World Series.
No, even besides that,
Okay.
like I just love to travel, and I hadn't done that much traveling
Yeah.
before the wreck.
Yeah.
But now I've lived in like 4 different states, and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So we go to Omaha, a place called QLI or Quality Living Incorporated. And what they focus on is independence. Their goal is to get you kind of where you can live again. So Caleb lived in a little house with other people that had injuries. And we didn't get to stay with him or be there for him. It was hard.
Oh, so
But
you guys had to, but you were there.
we were staying in a little apartment.
Okay, but
and
you
we
weren't in his facility.
in his room. That's right. So we had to trust other people with his care, but it was during there that turned out to be such a good thing for Caleb because he needed to regain some independence. You know, he's 17 years old. He had turned 17 in May, and a 17-year-old, the normal 17-year-old, is going to be able to do those things. And Caleb needed to relearn. And QLI was a kind of a moment for Caleb to say, "I'm regaining some of my life back." You know.
Yeah, I love in the book you say that QLI was pretty much their main purpose was to give Caleb a future worth living for.
That's right.
And I love that. I was
Yep.
like, man, what a place that would take you in just as you are
That's right.
and say,
That's
and
right.
It's a picture of God too. He takes us in and he
Broken.
says, all of that,
Yep.
that's really not a big deal.
That's right.
But I'm going to show you and give you a future worth living for.
That's it.
And I love that how you said it about them, and I thought that's exactly what God does for us.
Yep. You know, Craig Hospital has a really cool logo about it. It's the image of a broken person, and they try to make them whole physically. QLI does the same thing, but there's such a spiritual parallel because we're all broken, and then God takes what's broken and makes it stronger, makes it better through the power of Jesus Christ. And so we got to kind of see that physically with our eyes, and And then, of course, we've gotten to see, we haven't even talked about this, but because the big spiritual transformation happened with Caleb when we went to Boise, Idaho, which was the next place,
Because you've been to a few.
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just a quick trip around the world.
Yeah, he goes to.
I loved it, though.
We were in
I
Omaha.
love traveling.
Yeah, we were in Omaha 3 months, and then Caleb lost his left ear in the accident. So
And once again, I would show y'all, but I mean, y'all can't see it.
you can't see it. But so we found the surgeon, and the guy's a facial reconstruction guy. So we end up in Boise, and Caleb had rib cartilage taken out and skin grafts and all kind of stuff to rebuild his ear. And while we were there, he was in a lot of pain. I guess when you take rib cartilage out, it's pretty painful, right, Caleb?
No, it freaking hurts. Because like at the moment it was like 75,000 pounds directly to my side vehicle. That may not have got me, but that rib cartilage, it was gonna take me down.
That's right.
So he is semi-collided, not a big deal.
That's it.
But he and
Yeah.
rib cartilage collided, not so good.
Not gonna make it. So one night he was feeling all this pain. He was saying goodbye to Emily and I, like he thought he was dying. Bye, Mom. Bye, Dad. I love you guys. I said, Caleb, you survived 75,000 pounds. You're gonna survive this rib cartilage.
But in the moment, I really didn't think I was going to.
So then, kind of out of nowhere that night, Caleb says to me, Dad, I don't think I'm a Christian. And, I'm thinking, man, I remember him praying when he was a child and I baptized him. Does he not remember that? Is it the brain injury? And Caleb has all of his long-term memory. He's got amazing memory. He remembers things that I don't remember from his childhood.
I'm like an elephant like that.
That's what you are, an elephant. So he said,
he said, I'm an elephant for memory. You're an elephant for fatness.
Did you hear that?
These are those moments you mentioned.
These are the moments.
But this is how he gets people to talk.
This is how he gets people to talk. Caleb has two passions in life: tell people about Jesus and roast his father. That's what he does.
It's really good for the whole setup, the way y'all do
It's really good.
But I feel like that's my job because for so much of my life,
Here it
I
comes.
was shy, and my dad was more outgoing. So I'm convinced he would do things just to embarrass me. But jokes on them because now the roles have been reversed, and I have the authority to embarrass the crap out of him.
Oh, thank you, Caleb. You have the authority.
Well, I mean, it does.
God has given me that.
God has given me that.
It just comes with it.
It just comes with it. But he loves to do that. He loves to. We could tell you story after story after story of all the ways he's embarrassed me. But that night, I said, Caleb, do you not remember your being saved and baptized? He said, no, I remember that. He said, but Dad, I don't really think I've given my life to God. And so one of our messages when we travel is, man, most people would say they believe in God, but there's a difference between believing in God and giving your life to God, right? And it's the difference between information and transformation. And so Caleb, before the wreck, he had more of an information-based, he says more religion, but now he's got a transformation-based relationship. So that night he prayed to receive Christ. And I'm just telling you, we used to put music by Caleb's head and say, God, resurrect Caleb. My wife and I were begging God to physically resurrect Caleb, but we had no idea God was doing something much deeper and much better in Caleb's heart. And God didn't just resurrect Caleb physically, he resurrected him spiritually. I mean, he's a totally new person.
I love that because you mentioned in the book, and I heard it when I watched your YouTube video. One of them, like I said, I just randomly picked one.
It's good.
I
It's good.
noticed that you talked about how different he was, what we're talking about right now.
That's right.
What came to my mind immediately, I was in my kitchen, and I was looking for a piece of paper as fast as I could get one because I thought to myself when you said it, I went, he gave Caleb a childlike faith.
He did.
He's not a child at all.
That's right.
He's not. I'm here, people. He's not a child. But what he gave Caleb was a continual childlike faith. We grow out of that as Christians.
That's right.
We hear that in the Bible and we think about how easy it is for children to trust their father, trust their mother, and then they grow older and we all get out and we do our own thing. But God implanted in your heart exactly what he says in the Bible about having a childlike faith.
Yeah.
That playful, that giddy spirit.
That's right.
The quick to get a laugh, but as soon as I get the laugh, I got you, and now I'm going to share something with you that's going to be life-changing.
You got it.
I just thought, oh oh my gosh, Caleb is the walking billboard for childlike faith.
He
That's
is.
what it looks like.
It does.
It
No,
looks
that's
like
a-
not being ashamed to put your face on the floor
Mhm.
during worship.
That's right.
It looks like walking into Walmart and saying, you know what, you made eye contact, that's your fault. But think about children. Children, they do those things because they're not afraid of being rejected.
That's so good.
And God, that's what he gave him.
Hmm.
He gave him a literal walking childlike faith. And
That's right.
everywhere he goes, he's unashamed. He's
Yeah, he really, honestly, that's, my wife and I have talked about, we don't know what life looks like through Caleb's eyes. Like, what does life look like through? I wonder
Oh,
what.
it's magnificent.
childlike faith.
There it is, right there.
I might not have answered that way.
But it's like you wonder what he sees and how he sees it, not just physically, because his eyes obviously he's had some damage, but how does he process? And it's amazing to me because we've learned a lot from Caleb. I think most of us in this life, we're always thinking about where we're going next, that next place, where I got to be next. We live and die by the clock and the calendar. Caleb's really never concerned about where he is next. He's always concerned about where he is right now, like in the moment. And I'm bad about that, especially in ministry. You're always thinking about where do I got to be next? And Caleb he lives in the moment, sometimes too much in the moment. Sometimes like, Caleb, we got to go. We're going to be late, and he's like, nah, but you're right. It's childlike.
It's a tough price to pay.
Tough price to pay. But he's taught us about being in the moment. He's taught us about really, when you talk to Caleb, he makes you feel like you're the most important person in the room. And very few people have that ability because so often people are like, are you distracted? Are you even focused on what I'm saying right now? Caleb has a way to make you feel like you are the only person that matters in that moment. And those are gifts.
He is.
Yeah.
For Caleb, it is that whoever's in front of you, Caleb, that is the most important person because you're not seeing them for being a person. You're seeing them for being a soul that can be transformed into the kingdom.
Amen.
That's right.
And I love that. We could all learn a lesson on that. Because even the Bible tells us that we're not supposed to be worried about tomorrow and the next day. Those things haven't even come yet.
That's right.
And that we need to be in the moment. And so the fact that you can live that way, that's amazing because I know I can't.
That's right.
I'm already planning 3 months down the road.
Yep.
I haven't even finished today, but I'm 3 months ready.
You got 3 months ready.
Down
and,
the
and
road.
and that's been fun. So so Caleb, that night gave his life to the Lord, and then he came back, and his junior year of high school, man, was tough. I mean, we watched our strong athletic son have to relearn how to tie his shoes, brush his teeth, put a fork to his mouth. And it was ridiculous. Like it was so hard for Caleb, but really so hard for our family. We're driving Caleb all around, going to therapy, and we tried every therapy known to man. He did oxygen therapy, and we've done
horse riding.
He did horse riding. He's done acupuncture. He's done chiropractic care. We've done so many things to try to help him.
But the reason why I'm so open to doing all those other things is because that just puts me in front of audiences that I never would have gone to without doing those things. That I'm able to share my story, and maybe they get to experience the hope of Jesus that way.
That's right. It's exactly right. It just puts Caleb in front of different people to share the story. And so, but his junior year, one of the things about Caleb was, he was a runner. And so God really built him in a unique way. We write about the parallel in the book between the physical running and the spiritual running. And Caleb would go out to that football field every day, and man, he would just try to work so hard, and he was always determined to try to get better too. And sure enough, man, he just began to make more progress. He got to run his senior year. He got to run a 5K that got covered by NBC Nightly News. If you Google Caleb Freeman, NBC Nightly News, it pulls up the great run. He got to shoot the first shot the night of senior night. Just some really cool things. And then COVID hit. Graduates in the middle of a pandemic. But then he got to go to college and Rose State.
But you're leaving out one thing.
What am I leaving out?
After I ran the race and stuff, and shot the basket, I won homecoming king.
He's the king. How did I leave that out? He won the king.
Yeah, and then I didn't even kiss the queen.
Didn't kiss her. You wanted to, but you didn't.
I did, but I was a childhood best friend.
Childhood best friend.
I showed tremendous restraint.
Great restraint.
I mean, anyone else, I may have smacked my spaghetti suckers right on it.
Well, we appreciate you showing our listeners how to hold back and do the right thing.
Yeah, discipline, self-discipline. But yes,
That's your lesson 101 from Caleb Freeman.
there it is.
You're
We're
gonna
still
get that right here today.
we're still learning from him.
Uh,
But he graduated high school, then he graduated college, and it's amazing, you know. And now for the last 6 years, we've just been on this journey of watching God use him. Which again, you have to know, he's the last one of my kids I would ever picked, like because he didn't fit the mold. But God takes the most unlikely of your kids and uses them, you know, or most unlikely of people, and uses them in extraordinary ways.
So let's talk about that shift. So now we're up to speed, right? We're here current day.
Yep.
You guys are traveling. You're getting called to do all kinds of
Right.
talkings like a podcast.
Yeah.
What are you seeing? What are you seeing the reaction? Like, what are some of the stories and the things you're hearing about how impactful? Because it's one thing to say, God gave me the story, God gave me the story, but
Yep.
you guys get to actually
See it.
the story.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you what, I could spend here for about an hour, you know, because I will tell you, every single place that we go, no matter how small the audience or how large the audience, somebody, number one, always gives their life to Christ. I can't think of a place we've gone where someone hasn't been saved. We've seen as few as one, and we've seen as many as over 150 in one setting.
Didn't you have a basketball team?
Oh yeah, that was early on too.
That was like the
Yeah.
second speaking of it.
Second speaking event he ever did, we got invited to the Maybe Center up in Tulsa, and there was an entire basketball team from Stillwater that came forward, giving their life to Christ. Unbelievable. I mean, we recently, a few months ago, we spoke at our very first at a prison, which made me nervous, taking Caleb into a prison. What's he going to say to prisoners? You know, don't say your joke.
Don't worry. I held off.
You did. Yes, he held off.
I did good.
You did great. But some of these guys are in there serving life sentences, and 4 of them gave their life to Christ that day. We have spoken at an AFLAC convention. We've spoken for Hobby Lobby corporate offices. We most of our stuff is in like churches. So what's really cool is we go in, and a lot of times we get to speak in the public schools, and we keep it strictly motivational. We're not allowed to talk about God, and most of them. Some are more flexible, but most of the time it has to be really inspirational. Caleb, this dude can plank for 15 minutes, okay? Planking. Now, planking is one of those gifts. He's got the ability. So we'll always end our school assembly by letting Caleb plank against the captain of the football team or some great softball player. Caleb's undefeated, and it's amazing. And we invite them to come hear him speak that night. And we've had a ton of students come back and, of course, give their life to Christ. But a couple of stories that really stand out.
But there's like really 2 things. We can't not mention this. There's 2 new abilities I've gotten after the wreck.
2 abilities.
One is the plank,
Yes.
and then one is a killer wink.
He has a killer wink.
I mean,
So he gets the sports people on that, and he gets the girls.
Girls on the other.
right. And I know I can't say you all, which makes me sad because
true.
that's usually one of my favorite things to show people.
Is your wink.
But also you.
He's going to show the wink. Ready?
You know, I just might
Bam.
video of it and show it. Oh,
Bam. There it is. It's
You
killer.
might have to record that and put it out.
Record the wink.
Oh, I would appreciate that.
Yeah. But 2 stories that I love that kind of show Caleb. Well, there's multiple, but one is we were in Tennessee, and we were eating at a Cracker Barrel one evening, and it was on a Friday night, and we were speaking the next morning on a Saturday at like 10 a.m. And the waitress, Caleb always shares with the waitress, and this waitress came over, and Caleb's begging her to come hear us speak the next morning. And she's like, well, I live 45 minutes away. In my human mind, my non-childlike mind, I'm like, she's not coming. No way. And so I'm like, Caleb, let it go. She's not coming. He's like, no, you know. So anyway, we leave and go on. Well, the next morning, 10 a.m., this lady, she came to hear us, and she brought her 10-year-old son with her to hear Caleb. And she said, I went home that night, and I just Googled you. And she said, I got lost in the videos. And she goes, I watched and read all about you for several hours. She goes, I had to come hear you and bring my son. I want my son to meet you. So we get in there. We do our presentation, and that morning, her 10-year-old son gave his life to the Lord. And I'm like, Caleb, had he not invited her, she doesn't come, and stayed after it. She doesn't bring her son. Maybe her son, I don't know, but it was amazing. Then one of the stories we share everywhere we go, we went to a town outside, a little town in Oklahoma, and it was right before COVID. And man, we are in this little town, and I think I write about this in the book. I can't remember if I shared this or not, but we pull in this little town, and the lady sent me a message. There's an FCA. We do lots of fellowship of Christian athlete stuff. She said, when you get to into town, meet us in the cafeteria. We're going to have dinner, and then we're going to go back to the gym for the event. We pull into the gym, and I was like, I'm going to go in there and ask somebody where the cafeteria is. Well, right when I pull in, this high school girl comes walking out wearing a basketball uniform. So I'm asking her for directions. Well, her mom pulls up right then. She sees what's going on. She says, hey, just follow us. We'll show you where it is. So she starts driving. We're following her. She points, and I pull in my truck to this parking lot, and she drives on. Well, while Caleb and I were getting out of the truck, they turned the car around to come back and talk to Caleb. And in Oklahoma, this happens literally everywhere we go. I mean, you can't go anywhere.
That's why he locks you in the truck.
He locked me in the truck. You know that story. He locked me in. That's a great one. But this mom came back to talk to Caleb, and she said, you're Caleb Freeman, right? He said, yes. And she said, I saw you were coming to our town. We can't come tonight, but I wanted to come meet you. She goes, I followed your story from the night of the wreck. I can't tell how many people tell us that. And all Caleb heard her say was, we're not coming.
Yeah, he had loss of getting to share and level.
That's right. So he's begging her to come, and the mom finally says, we'll try. Well, anyway, so that night we go back over to the gym, and sure enough, the mom and daughter show up. They come walking in. I couldn't believe it. And that night, man, I asked everybody to, bow their heads after I shared our story, shared the gospel. I said, if you want to give your life to Christ, I want to lead you in a prayer. I led him in a prayer, and I said, if you just prayed, raise your hand. That young girl's hand went up that we met walking out of the gym that day. And Caleb and I were driving home that night. I said, Caleb, think about that, man. We just happened to pull in right when she happened to walk out. Her mom just happened to recognize you. Her mom just happened to circle back around. Caleb just happened to beg him to come, and that young lady just happened to give her life to Christ. I said, there was nothing accidental about that. I mean, God had the whole thing set up.
And there's the whole story.
Yes.
It's funny.
It's a but God deal.
When I was driving to the dentist and I had your book and was at a red light, and I opened it. I just opened it for a second. I don't even know why I did. I opened it, and it went to the page where it says that right there, that there's nothing accidental.
That's right.
About any of this. And I knew right then I was in trouble because I went. I kind of had a flashback of my own life.
Yes.
And I thought, I was like, thank you for that reminder, God, that the good, the valley, the mountaintops, the happy, the all the things.
Yeah.
None of them were accidental.
Nope.
They are a divine appointment with your Father, and you get to choose what you do with them.
He's in charge.
Let's be honest, this story, being a pastor or not, it could have went a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And not so much with him, he could still be here, but what if you weren't taking it and putting it out there? What if your heart had been hardened?
Mm-hmm.
But God
That's right.
says, no, this thing that right now is painful and hurts, it's going to be a beautiful gift, not only for Caleb, but for your whole family.
I appreciate you saying that. That is our heart, because I would never wish our life on somebody else. And I honestly, there are days I kind of wish this wasn't our story, on my more selfish days. But then we go and we see God use it in somebody's life profoundly. We were just recently in a town, and a lady came up to me, and she said, I try to be careful with names and all that stuff, but a lady came up to me and she said, hey, in the spring, she goes, we had a revival at our church, and she said, my husband, he gave his life to Lord and she said, me and my husband both, we gave our lives to Lord on a Tuesday night. Well, Thursday, her husband was getting gas, and he dropped dead right there while he was getting gas in the gas station parking lot. Massive heart attack. This guy's like 30-something years old. He just had a physical. There was no sign of, and so now this is months later. We were back at this church, and we were doing a revival, and she came up to me. She said, I knew you guys were going to be here. She goes, I didn't want to come because I didn't want to relive the pain and my grief. She said, but God has used your story this week to remind me that my pain is not meaningless, and God's going to use my story for his glory. And I could just tell you hundreds of stories like that about how God has allowed our pain to somehow bring some sort of comfort to somebody else. And then also a hope that God could use their story in some way. Everybody's got a story, and everybody's story is different. And God wants to use everyone's story, right, to reach people. And so we could say, okay, God, I wish this didn't happen. But at the same time, he's using it for eternal things that are going to really matter. And in that I rejoice.
And like a lot of times, like I've just noticed, like with myself, with other people, I'm seeing a lot of times we're hesitant to share our story as in our own like in our human minds, we don't think it can do that much in other people's lives.
That's right.
But it's just so important that we're just faithful to share boldly and confidently with everyone we come in contact to, because you never know what God will take your little story and the big things He will use it to do in those people's lives.
Man, that's good, Caleb.
It's amazing. I'm so excited again that I get to sit here and see the story. It's one thing to read the book, but to see the living, breathing story, it's amazing. All right, so tell me this. How has this changed? Because clearly we see how it's changed, Caleb.
Yes.
Literally a whole different person. You know, he went to sleep as one person.
Yep.
He woke up a new person.
I went to sleep in a coma as a shy nobody, and I came out as a bold somebody being used by God.
Yeah, tell them what you always say, Caleb. I think this is hilarious.
No,
not that. Tell them what you say about how when I get on to you, you're being obnoxious or something.
Oh yeah, like I kind of love it too, because like when my parents or my mom and dad are getting on to me, like I'm doing something to like embarrass them, and they're getting on to me, and I say, "Why are y'all getting mad at me? Y'all prayed for this."
We prayed for this.
Well, you did.
See, and it's like, how can I argue with that? You can't. Yeah.
So winner, loser.
Oh, I think you're both winners.
Thank you.
Oh, winner.
That's right.
That's
so,
right.
Jeremy, how has this changed who you are as a father, a husband, and a pastor, especially a pastor? Because we see the change in Caleb.
Right.
But you're walking this story with him because you're the one who's sharing, and you guys do this together. And so it's a little different because you have this kind of special story together.
Right.
So how has that impacted and changed you individually?
Man, to try to put like into just words everything how God's used this, it's impossible. It's impacted my life in such significant ways because as a pastor, man, it's taught me how to really prioritize and how to have a better perspective on ministry, because it's like I think a lot of times pastors can get lost. They get wrapped up in a program or some kind of a whatever it is. They can even lose their own focus about why am I doing what I'm doing? You know, it's really about people. It's about getting in people's lives. It's ministering to people where they're at and reminding them of the hope that they have in Christ. And so it's I pray different, right? We plan differently as a church. At our church, we don't want to waste our time on trinkety kind of things that the church has just done because they've done them forever. We realize we're on this earth for a short period of time, and the church knows. I say this all the time. I don't remember where I heard it, but somebody once said, "Let what will matter 5 minutes after you die matter the most right now." And so we like to say that as a family, we want to live with the eternal perspective, and as a church, we want to live with the eternal perspective. And so I pray different. Man, when I go and I pray for somebody in the hospital, I actually believe with all of my heart. I always believed it, but it was shaken. Now I really believe that God could heal this person right here, right now, if He so chooses to do that. He doesn't always do that, and we're going to trust Him no matter what. If this person takes their final breath 5 minutes later and God calls them home, we're going to trust God with that. But I also believe He can heal them. God used Caleb to kind of resurrect some things in me that had died, personally. And so I pray different. I lead differently. I think I minister to people differently. Man, I tell you what, I feel people's pain. And a lot of times you can kind of just gloss over things. And it's like, oh, there's so much pain in the world. But man, I tell you what, I when I meet people that are suffering, I feel it. And it changed. I exactly. I empathize because I know what that feels like. I know what loss feels like. And it puts you in a category of ministry that you don't necessarily want to be in, but man, it sure does help you minister better. And so, I mean, I could go on and on and on, but it's like, it really has. I told the church not too long ago that I feel like Caleb's wreck didn't just change Caleb for the better, but he changed me for the better. I'm a better pastor. I feel like I'm a better preacher because of it. You know, I can't remember who said this. One of the great theologians, either like Spurgeon or somebody once said that suffering has been his greatest teacher more than any other theological book. And suffering has been a great teacher for me. God has used that in my life in a way that no classroom or no book or no seminar could have ever done. So in that regard, I'm changed in every possible way.
But like what I'm saying is like suffering can really do either one of two things to your faith. It can either destroy your faith, which we say all the time.
That's right.
Or the perspective you choose to look at it with, it can either refine your faith or destroy your faith. And like that comes from, are you looking at like what was taken away from your life from the thing you're walking through, or what was given to your life from the thing you're walking through? Like looking at what you've lost or what you have left. And if you choose to look at what you have left, you're going to be made stronger through your struggle. And you're going to be able to live out even more effectively too.
That's right.
Caleb, thank you. Just another tip from Caleb.
That's right.
It's so wonderful, guys. Thank you so much. I don't want to leave today without letting people know where they can get your book from.
Yeah.
I know you have a website, so will you guys share how people can reach out if they want to have you come and speak, or where they can grab your book?
Yeah.
We'll also put that information in the description of this episode, so that way you don't have to get a pen real quick and write it all down.
Yeah.
But share some of the things you're doing out there that people can be involved with, or you guys can be involved with them.
Yeah. The best way, or the best thing right now, we have a website called #butgod.com. You spell it out, so it's all the words, HASHTAGBUTGOD.com. And on that website, you can read about just our family story. You can also see where we're speaking. It's got our speaking schedule on there. You can request us to come to your event. You can request myself. You can request Caleb. Caleb doesn't go by himself just yet, but me and Caleb, you can request Emily or all three of us. And there's a way to do that. People often say, what does it cost to bring you guys in? We don't have any fee or anything like that. We work with the groups. We kind of tell people what we like to get or what we normally get. It all goes to Caleb's medical fund, which is super helpful to him in his recovery, but also this is what he's doing with his life. And then also on there, we have a new thing that we've established. But there's also a link on there that says the goods. So you can get the book on there. You can get merchandise like hoodies and hats and shirts. All that's on the #butgod.com website. But also we've created this, people often say, what's Caleb going to do with the rest of his life? And this is a new thing. We have a foundation that came to us called New Horizons Foundation out of Colorado Springs. And basically, they're kind of partnering with Caleb. We're raising money. People can support Caleb on a monthly basis or annual basis or whatever, even a one-time gift. And it enables him to actually do the things that God's called him to do without always my help in his life. So other people can go with him. We make a lot of hospital visits, and we advise on the phone. We talk about how people can choose a hospital and what they're looking for. We talk about recovery. We have all these families we're talking to all the time about helping them. And this is something Caleb can do, and people can support him that way. And all that information is on the website there as well. So, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I appreciate you asking that. Thank you.
And you have the book. Guys, I got the book off Amazon.
That's the best place to get it.
He says that's the best place.
It's the cheapest place.
Okay, well, that's the best place to get
There
it.
you go. The cheapest, because you can do Audible or Kindle. All that's on Amazon as
And
well.
we will put all that as well.
Thank
so
you.
that you can grab it. And I'm just going to tell you guys, I don't like to read. After spending so many years at college, I gave up books. I mean, I do read, but I don't like it. But this book, I read it in 3 hours because I couldn't put it down. And I told Jeremy and Caleb today that he does a beautiful job in painting a portrait, which was a movie that I didn't want to quit watching. And I
Thank
knew
you.
the ending. I knew the ending, and I
Still didn't want it over.
Still couldn't put it down. Because
Praise
guys,
God.
These guys have an amazing story, and again, there's all kind of things in the book that we didn't even get to today. But you've got to read this book. You do what you can to support this family, whether it's through prayer, supporting them through their ministry, or helping with Caleb. We don't really know you guys well, but we love you already, and we just want everybody else to love you as much as we
Thank
do.
you. You're awesome for having us. We're so grateful to you.
You're awesome for me being here. And what's so crazy about this story is that I was not really supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be in Tulsa tomorrow, and I have a friend here from school way back when. And when I told her I was coming here, I haven't seen her in a while, she immediately said, I'm having a God moment. Have you heard of these people in this story? And I was like, I live in Texas. I haven't heard any of that. And so she starts telling me, and she's reaching out, I'm reaching out, and I had to make travel arrangements because we have a big family too, and we just had to get things in place for me to be able to be gone.
Sure.
And so the Holy Spirit told me to leave a day open, and I thought, there's no way these guys are going to be like, yes, that day is beautiful. But God orchestrated it that you are here.
That's right.
You're actually supposed to be where I am.
That's right.
The day before, but that this day was a divine appointment,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm so thankful because again, I think this story is beautiful, and
Thank you.
what you guys offer is wonderful. So Caleb, two things. Can I ask a favor of two things?
Yeah.
First, I'd like you to give just kind of wrapping up thoughts, like what you would want listeners to hear.
Well, of course.
And then I would like for your dad, if he doesn't mind, you do a beautiful job of explaining what the gospel is and what sin is and why it's important. I would love for you to share that, and then I would love for you to pray us out.
You bet.
Sounds fantastic.
That's right, Caleb.
Look at this. This is the attitude we should all
He's
have.
ready, man. All right, Caleb, what are your parting words, brother?
My parting words are, this life is very temporary. Like, no one ever thinks anything bad is ever going to happen in their life until it actually does. But by that time, it could be too late for you to want to change your life. So I would encourage everyone today is to already get a relationship with Jesus Christ, because I'm telling you right now, that is the only thing that is going to give you hope at all times, no matter what.
And that's good, Caleb. You know, we share the gospel everywhere we go, and the gospel is the most simple message in the world, but also the most powerful message in the world. So what is the gospel? The gospel is that every single person that's ever been born is born a sinner. I tell people I've had 7 kids. I've never once had to teach any of them how to sin. You know, they're cute little kids, but they're big little sinners. And because the Bible says that's who we are sinners. And our sin separates us from a perfect and holy God. And there's not a thing in the world that we can do to ever earn our salvation, buy our salvation. We're stuck. Man's worst problem is, how can a sinful person ever be right with a holy God if he can't do anything about it? That's what but God means. But God is rich in mercy, Ephesians 2:4. Romans 5:8. But God demonstrated his love for us while we were yet sinners. Christ died for us. So God did for us what we could never do for ourselves. He sent Jesus Christ, the Son of God, God the Son, lived a perfect life, died on the cross, and rose again 3 days later. And the Bible says that anyone who would repent of their sin, place their faith and trust exclusively in Jesus, and confess him as the boss and the Lord of their life, can have a real relationship with God through Jesus Christ. So the hope of the gospel is, admit that you're a sinner, ask God to forgive you, repent of that sin, believe exclusively in Jesus, and then surrender your life to him as the boss. Jesus is boss. That's what Lord means. And if you'll do that today, this is the most amazing things. If you're listening today, you don't have a real relationship with God, you can call upon Jesus right here, right now. He will forgive you of your sin, not just your past sin, but your present and your future. He will come live inside of you. He will save you, and not only today, but for the rest of your life and all of eternity. That's the hope of the gospel.
And like, once you accept Jesus, you don't have to give one more thought to your past, because that stuff's already happened.
It's gone.
And Jesus has already forgiven you for that. So now you can just shift the focus to start living for the beautiful future Jesus wants to bring to you.
You know, Kev, that means God has the final say, which means hashtag
But God.
But God. There it is.
I love it. All right, Caleb, will you do us the honor?
Of course.
I know you love to pray for people and pray with people, so will you pray over our listeners and,
Yeah.
and just let them see you shine?
That's right.
Oh yeah. Dear Jesus, I just come before humble right now. Jesus, I'm always humble to be able to talk to you, because I know I shouldn't still be here and definitely shouldn't have the ability to talk to you. But God, out of your grace, you've given me that back, so it's not so I'd use it for myself, once I could use it to step into the things you want me to do. I pray over all the listeners today that they would take what they've heard, apply it to their lives, and start to live more positively, like the way you would intend. And I pray everyone has a great rest of the day, and you reveal yourself in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Caleb, so much. And thank you guys for listening today. We were glad to have you here with us. You can always reach out if you made that prayer today and you want more information on what it looks like to live that kind of life, or where you can reach out to a church. We would love to help you. So please go to www.steppingforwardfwd.org, or you can reach out in the messages through Instagram and Facebook and all the different places. So again, thank you guys so much. And I think we're done. I think we're out, guys.
See ya.
See ya.
Girl.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Southern Soul Chats. We hope you found inspiration, encouragement, and valuable insights to carry with you through your week. We invite you to subscribe to Southern Soul Chats so that you never miss an episode. We are a branch of Stepping Forward Ministries, a 501c3 Christian nonprofit, and we kindly ask for you to consider making a donation today. Your contribution will play a vital role in sustaining the podcast and allowing us to continue sharing these impactful stories of faith. As you leave today, remember your story is a part of a bigger narrative, and your faith has power to guide your path. Keep stepping forward with hope, trust, and assurance that you're never alone. This is Dr. Miranda Ferguson. We hope you have a great week and keep stepping forward.